What is it? Several things come to mind. First, regulatory reform. FDIC has ensured that bank losses are not immediately felt by depositors. It'll be stretched out over a number of years. There will be FDIC expenses built into banking costs. But for now, FDIC is hanging together, and it's preventing people from losing their retirement money that's in the bank. The second thing that is taking place and is different than the last depression is the speed at which people are being kicked out of their homes. Even though not enough people have taken advantage of the various federal refinancing programs, we still can see that compared with how fast foreclosures began ramping up in the 1930s, we're seeing a slower rate of foreclosure, and we're seeing a lot of banks go to some extraordinary efforts in order to keep loans in the performing loan category so that they don't have to admit to how bad things really are. Another factor, of course, is that this all may relate to something we call the debt berg, which is basically the number of years that you can keep watering down a currency before it essentially falls to nothing. In 1919, the U.S. dollar would buy you a lot more than it does today. In fact, it would buy you almost 40 times more than it will buy you today in the way of purchasing power. But it's not that the cost of a steak dinner as an intrinsic value has changed. I mean, steak and potato in 1919 is the same as a steak and potato of today.
Right.
But what's changed is we've simply printed up somewhere between 20 and 100 times. We could argue how much money's been created, but we've printed up so much money that the price seems to go up. But it's not that prices go up. You see, this is part of the big myth. Prices do not go up. The value, the intrinsic purchasing power of your money goes down. So if I had $1, the most I can ever pay for a steak dinner is $1. Well, that's 1919. Today I've got $30 in my pocket. So hey, guess how much a steak dinner is going to be? And it's that way with tuition. It's that way with housing, and you see how that works.
Yep, that's creeping inflation.
Well, and it's really started at the Fed, and I'm not going to bankster bash, although it's pretty easy to do. But they have a figure that's reported monthly called the Consumer Credit Report. Well, it's not credit, it's debt. It's how fast are people putting their head in the debt noose. But they don't call it debt, because if they called it debt, people go, oh, crap, I don't want to have any of that. So instead they go, oh, it's consumer credit. Yeah, I just got another credit card. In the interest of disclosure, why couldn't the banksters have called it a debt card?
Good point.
And why do they call it bankruptcy reform? No, it's bankruptcy punishment. It isn't reform. Reform my butt. It's punishment. You can't get out from a student loan anymore, even if there's no job there. The government comes out with a report every year called the Occupational Outlook from the Department of Labor, and if you're going to go spend $40,000 on an education, one of your trusted sources that every vocational counselor in the world and every education counselor in the world looks at is this Occupational Outlook. Crap, they're still looking at growth for construction management supervisors, for God's sake. It's like, hello, I think we have enough. What we need are some people in government at, I don't want to say a super committee level, But Congress would be a good starting point to direct federal agencies to get their head out of the sand and start looking at real-time numbers and more accurate look-ahead numbers, because the last time I looked, they're still looking for major construction growth in the United States in the coming 5-year period. Now, I'm not sure, but most places have a lot of vacant housing. I'm not sure, but when my wife and I were up in Detroit this summer for the National Society of Newspaper Columnists. I happen to be a member of that group, good group. We were up in Detroit, and we got the tour of the Quicken Loan Command Center and so forth. Very heads-up companies in Detroit. But right next door are empty friggin' buildings. And now you saw this week Detroit's going to try a city lottery to prop their shit up.
Yeah.
It's like, what the hell? But we are all living in a financial Disneyland right now. And we're supposed to hold to the idea that this is how reality really operates. And I'm sorry, but Uncle George is a little concerned. So I just sit out here and keep consulting clients and keep to myself. But if somebody wants to go read Urban Survival or Peoplenomics, well, then that's one more educated person who may be inclined to ask harder questions of the idiots running for office, some 90 of which this week proved they were anti-Constitution, anti-America by saying it's okay for the military to arrest Americans. No, that's the job of local law enforcement if they're on American soil. I mean, even during the Democratic Convention, the National Guard was called in, sure. But they handed the people over to the local authorities for prosecution and trial. That's going away. Now, I don't know about you, but that's a little bit of a concern, because that's when words like fascism come out. And yes, I understand. In fact, I wrote about it in Peoplenomics this morning. The problem with MF Global. Oh my God, what a can of worms that is. And yet, no one has been arrested. Why? Members of the club, the good old boys. They're plugged in. I mean, yeah, Corsine's been subpoenaed by Congress, but I'll have to call him this week and ask, but I'm wondering if Gerald Celente ever got his gold investments returned to him.
I doubt it.
And if he did, is it only because of his position as a squeaky wheel? What about the widow and orphan types who don't have any public forum and no horsepower? I mean, see, that's what's wrong. That's the injustice stuff we've got to solve. And the kind of change we've had so far has not been appropriate.
Right. I agree. We've got to have laws that can be enforced and everybody be held to the law. Well, thank you, George.
Hallelujah. I'm voting for you.
You've really given us a lot to think about, and I appreciate it.
And thank you very much, Roman. This kind of leads us into another area that will probably tie up a fair amount of time, but we'd really like to get your input on it, George. To me, at least, it seems that the fundamental and key components of trust with a capital T, in government, in money, systems, and institutions that have worked in the past are breaking down, and that the world's populace are waking up to the realization that they have been lied to, screwed over, and are in need of change. And what that change is and how it should or could initiate is open for debate and runs contrary to the established vested interests. This obviously is showing up in the North African upheaval, the riots and demonstrations in Europe, the Occupy movement, the Japanese citizenry's distrust of their government in the wake of the Fukushima disaster, etc. This is clearly running against the powers that be's goals and aspirations. Aside from Webbot predictions, how do you see this playing out over the next 3 to 6 to 12 months?
Depends on how the economy plays. We can almost make a Boolean table out of it. If this happens, then this happens. If That happens, then something else happens over here. If the economy collapses and it is because of endogenous or systemic internal causes, then things are going to get truly, truly ugly. Occupy Wall Street will turn into an even bigger deal and possibly higher levels of violence. My expectation, though, just based on, and this is only a couple of conversations, and I haven't read the upcoming bot report, but I have a sense of at least some of the things that may be in it. I think we all stand to be mightily surprised by the off the charts kind of outliers external to markets, external to everybody's plans for how they're going to go about keeping the country together. Picture, if you will, a situation where, millions of people find that their retirements will not buy them anywhere near the kind of lifestyle that they presently have. And so they're going to stay in the workforce, and that's going to keep young people from finding jobs. And so more and more young people are going to hit the streets and start demonstrating. You're going to have clashes between young and old over employment, healthcare rationing, and let's not forget the 3% or whatever sales tax on home sales that's coming as part of the healthcare bill at the end of 2012. But you'll notice not till after the elections, and the political parties at the trough will do everything they can to avoid that kind of thing. So if we have that, then we have one kind of ugly future with fighting in the street kind of scenarios. But suppose something else happens. Suppose the Pacific plate cracks and we get major tsunami activity, and that takes out much of the manufacturing around the Pacific Rim. And let's further suppose that this chain of mega quakes causes destruction of the Three Gorges Dam in China and kills 100 million people with flooding. And at the same time, New Madrid pops off, and we lose 30,000 dead, but virtually all infrastructure is ruined in an area basically from Mississippi through the upper Michigan Peninsula. So I guess what I'm saying is there's enough wild card stuff like that until I get a chance to read the report when it comes out and see, what final draft and how the space goat fart entity and all the other stuff looks, I think I'd be a fool to venture guesses as to how it all plays out. Of course, I am a fool, and you did ask.
I don't think you're a fool in any way, George. Like you, I hold an advanced degree, that MBA designation, and I will spin my own different sets of scenarios and Boolean tables and decision trees out into all kinds of different directions that'll go in a wide variety of different directions. And
exactly.
A lot of it is contextual and evolving, especially in these days today. For our last question, we're going to toss this one over to Ellery. Ellery?